Welcome to the Hope Academy of Senior Professionals September monthly program. A couple of days before the first day of enrollment for fall courses, my good friend Tom Urbanek emailed Kim and me with the following comment, and I quote, "I've just gone over the courses for the fall term and I am very impressed with the slate. My goodness, there are so many fine courses to choose from. My congratulations to HASP for putting together a truly great semester." End of quote. I wholeheartedly agree with Tom's observation. Thank you, Barb Stedging and Marshall Elzinga and all the members of the curriculum committees. Shortly after 11 a.m., thank you. Shortly after 11 a.m., the first day of enrollment, Kim advised a couple of us that 391 members had enrolled in the first 4 hours. That represents approximately half of our membership that got up that morning and registered. By the end of the day, 450 had registered. Since then, over 100 more have registered. So if my math is correct, we're approaching 70% of the membership has enrolled for one class or more. If you want to enroll in a closed class, please call the office and ask to be put on a waiting list. If the waiting list numbers justify it, Kim will try to see if the class can be moved to a larger venue. You may have noticed that some of us are wearing red schoolhouse badges. They are current and past volunteers with the Baggy Book program. They are happy to talk about how we help open the doors to reading for children through Baggy Books. Following our program today, there will be a short get-together about Baggy Books in the coffee area just outside that side door. I think I'm pointing in the right direction. Right, Maura? Thanks for considering the opportunity to serve as a volunteer or a substitute. Now, Carla Verscher, our membership chairperson, will introduce guests and new HASP members.
It's really amazing how every month we seem to squeeze a few more people into this room. I don't know when we're going to reach full capacity, but today we have nearly 35 guests and visitors. Rather than reading your names, would you please stand where you are so we can give you a HASP welcome? Thank you for joining us. We also have 22 new members, which we will recognize today. And so I'm asking, when I call your name, would you please, if you can make your way to the front here, so we can put a face with a name and officially welcome you. Beth Apotheker, John Apotheker, Nancy Barnes, David Carmichael, Linda Dykema, Margaret Elhart, Kathy Kaiser, Paul Kaiser, Ann Klipp, Todd Klipp, Bill Leismer, Ann Longarat, Donna McConnell, Bill McKinstry, Tina Pollock, Ronald Ropp, John Roush, Dale Schoon, got room for everybody? Charlotte Stewart, Patrick Stewart, Jerry Wagner, and Nancy Yetman. Welcome. Thank you so much, and hopefully you can find your way back to your seats.
Well, it appears that men are making a comeback. Thank you, Carla. Marilyn Schmidt from the Monthly Program Committee will now introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Larry. Good morning, everyone. It gives me great pleasure to welcome this morning's presenter, Katie Fahey. Following the 2016 presidential election, Katie just felt there was an awful lot of divisiveness and polarization in the country, and she resolved to do something about it. She posted on her Facebook page, quote, "I'd like to take on gerrymandering in Michigan. If you're interested in doing this as well, please let me know," end quote. The concept of creating a system that would represent voters rather than politicians took on a life of its own. Dozens, hundreds, and then thousands joined Fahey, and Voters Not Politicians, a nonpartisan organization, was born. This grassroots organization of 5,000 plus volunteers joined Fahey to take action to amend Michigan's Constitution and create an independent Citizens Redistricting Commission. Under her leadership, Voters Not Politicians volunteers collected more than 425,000 signatures from all 83 counties within a period of 110 days, far beyond the number that they needed. The vote for a constitutional amendment to change how Michigan's voting districts are determined will now be on the November 6th ballot. Fahey's efforts have drawn attention around the country. Huffington Post, the New York Times, Rachel Maddow's show, CNN, the Boston Globe, the Miami Herald, U.S. News and World Report, and Michigan Public Radio are among the many news outlets that have featured Katie Fahey and the Voters Not Politicians efforts. Fahey graduated from Aquinas College with degrees in sustainable business and community leadership and is working towards her MBA in sustainable business. Katie's career began with Spartan Nash, where she created their first sustainability program. Then she went on to work for the Michigan Recycling Coalition. Katie will discuss how grassroots campaigns can succeed and the purpose behind Proposal 2. At the conclusion of her presentation, there should be time for a few questions, and don't forget to vote on November 6th.
Hello, everyone. I'm so excited to see so many of you today. And I'm here because of a Facebook post. Thank you for the beautiful introduction. It's still astounding to me that about 2 years ago, I was digging around trash cans and heels doing waste audits. And now somehow I'm leading an effort to try and amend our state constitution. Did not think I would be here, but it's probably the best thing I will ever do in my life. So thank you so much, and I'm happy to go over what we have learned. Our Michigan Constitution begins with all political power is inherent in the people. I think as a young college graduate, maybe I took that a little too literally. And I was like, okay, people, I'm a people. All right, I can just, I got some power. Let's make that work. But always have really believed in the power of coming together, the ability to look at each other as citizens, not as one political party or another. And I do come from a politically divided household, so maybe that was part of it. Maybe it's part of being in the Midwest, I'm not sure. But really has always been a strong passion to me that we could be able to focus on issues as people instead of needing to just have one way that is the only way that something can be done. So during the 2016 election, I was actually very excited. My family traditionally hadn't talked about politics. A lot of my friends, I was always begging to remember to vote and to actually pay attention to who's running for drain commissioner. Something that I guess I weirdly was obsessed with, but not a lot of my friends were. But in 2016, I saw something new happening. Some of those friends and family who I'm constantly begging to just engage and talk about these issues that impact our lives were. I remember being at a birthday party, and I come over to some of my family and friends, and they're having a very detailed discussion on the differences between Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders, and Donald Trump is healthcare policy and childcare policy. And I was like, you guys, first of all, you know about healthcare and childcare policies? And second of all, you're debating about them? Like, who are you? I've never seen this side of anyone. And I actually, even if my political beliefs were different than some of my friends and family, I actually just really loved that we were actually talking about change in a substantial way. So 2016, although it was a little divisive, I really enjoyed it. And what I started to realize as I was paying attention and I saw how Michigan ended up voting in the primaries where Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump won, and then in the general election where Donald Trump won, and both of those weren't necessarily expected, I started really realizing that it seemed like a really common theme that people don't feel like their voices or their votes matter. They don't feel like politicians are looking out for them. They feel like if they do go and show up, does it, actually have an impact? Because when I started talking to my friends and family, really the two political figures they were more drawn to were either Bernie Sanders or Donald Trump. Two people who, with slightly different messages but about a similar concept, drain the swamp or the political revolution. All of that meaning the system isn't working for me, I'm tired of it, let's get stuff done. So after 2016, that rhetoric about policy differences and how we could try and work together seemed to completely dissipate overnight. I immediately saw, you voted this way, therefore you're evil. You voted this way, therefore you're evil. And I was like, no, remember how we're all friends and family and like we were just having thoughtful discussions? So I'm thinking about Thanksgiving dinner and I'm looking at Facebook and I'm like, oh no, I can't go. Like, I can't sit through another heartbreaking dinner where we are yelling at each other about who we voted for when the actual politician isn't the reality of what happens on the streets, on what impacts our lives. I personally think that sometimes politicians, I call it the Messiah complex, but people look at one person to come and solve everything. And that's not the case. It takes people, it takes our local representatives, it takes the drain commissioner to be able to actually start making some of those changes. So a little naively, and I was not expecting any of this to happen from this one Facebook post, I put on Facebook, I'd like to take on gerrymandering in Michigan. If you're interested in doing this as well, please let me know, smiley face. So the smiley emoji, I think, really is the trick to saving democracy. And what was really interesting is it's not like I had a lot of friends on Facebook, but slowly I started seeing a bunch of people throughout the day all talking about how they wanted to help and how they were waiting to get involved. Messages like from my friend Steve saying, I always want to fix this stuff, but I never know how to start. And I've always not been afraid of starting things. Started a recycling club, started the sustainability program at Spartan Nash. It doesn't intimidate me. I'm ready to jump in. But I didn't realize that maybe other people don't exactly know how. So seeing all of this, I realized that I had struck something. And that's kind of how we quickly evolved. We made a Facebook group. How many of you guys are on Facebook? Most people. Oh, fantastic. Great. Okay, so, you can make a group within Facebook, and that's where I started inviting people. There were a couple criteria to join. For the first part, you had to be there representing yourself. I felt like politicians and lobbyists get plenty of ways to manipulate our government, and I wanted one place where you could just go and you had to be representing your personal beliefs. The second was that it was going to be nonpartisan. You could have whatever personal political beliefs you want, but in this group, we weren't tearing people down based on how they voted, and we were going to create a solution that was going to be good for any Michigander, no matter how they vote. It wasn't going to favor one party or another, because I believe in democracy. What a strange concept. That if we actually have representation that matches how we vote, we'll get the solutions that we want as people. And then the third part was a basic ask for people to be civil, to keep things in strategy private so that people could feel free to share, because a lot of people felt uncomfortable starting to participate. A lot of people hadn't gotten involved in politics before. And that's kind of where our group took off from. So what quickly started as a Facebook post turned into a statewide movement. We have over 14,000 people who signed up to volunteer. I have about 5,000 active day-to-day volunteers. We can track metrics, they're doing stuff in every single county of the state. And again, going back to like naive college graduate, feeling like things should be for and by the people was really my goal. Feeling like decisions should be made by everybody across the state, not just one large city or one neighborhood, was really important, because I feel like, again, too often, so many of us feel like our voices don't matter, yet all of us have one person, one vote. When we go to the ballot booth, it should count equally. And then, as was mentioned, we ended up gathering all these signatures. And basically, our general concept is that voters should choose their politicians, not the other way around. And that's where we got the name Voters Not Politicians. That's our overall name. It's also that voters should be drawing our congressional district lines, not politicians. I have a quick video that goes over this just in case anybody doesn't know what gerrymandering is, so I'll see if that pops up. Otherwise, I can talk about it too. And I think the sound goes through, if I'm not mistaken.
Here in Michigan, there are geographical borders that define who we are, as well as lines of loyalty that separate us from them. That's better. There are border lines that tell us where we are, and border lines that tell us when we've gone, well, far enough. Michigan is defined by all kinds of borders: international borders, historical borders, coastal borders. But not all these borders are natural, or fair, or even right-minded. Some of our most important borders have been drawn up by politicians to serve their own political agendas. It's called gerrymandering, and it manipulates political boundaries which divide our neighborhoods, divide our communities, divide us from one another. Want proof? In the election of 2014, our state was pretty evenly split between the number of votes for Republicans and the number of votes for Democrats. But thanks to gerrymandering, one party, in this case the Republicans, took 70% of the seats in the state Senate. That's a supermajority taken by one party, even though they only got half the votes. And don't think it's only the Republicans who game the system. Right now, in states like Maryland, the Democrats have gerrymandered their districts in unfair ways. And then there's North Carolina and Illinois. The list goes on and on for both parties, and it's just not right. But here in Michigan, we can fix this. We can create an independent commission and a transparent process for drawing electoral district boundaries that encourage fair and competitive elections. That's just what we're working on at Voters Not Politicians. Our plan is to reform the process by amending the Michigan Constitution through a ballot initiative in the November 2018 election. And you can help us make fair elections the law of the land. How? Start by going to Voters Not.
We'll cover that later. What I really love about that video is that it was made by a team of probably 10 people who never actually met in person and organized all online, and it probably should have cost us like $7,000 for an animator like that, and it was all done for free by people who just cared and wanted to create an educational tool. So I think you guys have a general overview, but I'll go over it one more time. So basically, the word gerrymandering just means that politicians are manipulating their maps based on looking at you as a voter and guessing how you're going to vote. So they're literally saying, you're a Democrat or you're a Republican, so I'm going to either want you in my district or not want you in my district. Instead of looking at us as constituents, what a crazy concept, we are only looked at as how somebody thinks that we are going to either help or hurt them instead of how they can represent our communities. This redistricting process happens once every 10 years based on the US Census. Every single state is in control of their own process. There's a couple basic rules that the population should be as equal as possible. There's the Voting Rights Act to make sure that minorities can have representation, because historically there was a lot of suppression related to voting. But who actually draws those lines is up to the states. And in Michigan, we happen to have the legislature drawing the lines, but that isn't the case across the country. This is an example of the 9th, 11th, and 14th districts near the Detroit area. The 14th in particular, the very top of it is a garbage dump, which is interesting. And going all the way from the top of Pontiac to the bottom of Campus Marsh, it's actually a little more south, it's over 70 miles. That straight line is just directly going across 8 Mile. For some reason, if you live on one side of 8 Mile, you're apparently not in the same neighborhood as the people across the street from you. And then that little carve out, I don't know if no, I don't have that. The little carve out, District 11 and 14, is actually the separation between Farmington and Farmington Hills. So when you look at these things, it doesn't necessarily mean it was drawn with political intent, but it seems like it could be. I went to Aquinas, I'm sorry. But mad respect for Hope. But I live right now in Gaines Township, and so one of the most egregious examples I actually think is the 76th. If you see in between the 76th, you have Grand Rapids and East Grand Rapids, but for some reason that little carve out isn't part of those communities. What's really ridiculous is the street behind Aquinas' library. I don't know if any of you have ever been on it. This is a picture of it. This is 8 houses long. It starts in the 73rd district. It goes to the 75th, and at that it goes to the 76th, and at that stoplight is the 75th. I actually ran it the other day, and it took me 44 seconds to jog through 3 house districts. And I am very out of shape. What's bothersome to me is the kids in that neighborhood all probably take the same school bus. If there's a pothole or a crack in the sidewalk, or you want to actually get your representative to pay attention to you, what incentive do they really have when your one street is divided into 3 different house districts? And also, when it's already pretty hard to remember all of the things you need to vote on, how do you even know who your representative is? Because you're probably getting TV ads for all 3, but also all of the people who are in that race and all the mailing for that. Nothing is as precise as we would like it to be. So it leads to people, again, being frustrated by elections, but also representatives who have to somehow represent their entire district. My congressional member is Justin Amash. What's interesting is Battle Creek and Kalamazoo in this last round of the maps for the first time was separated. Battle Creek and Kalamazoo share an airport. Justin Amash gets to vote on airport regulations and federal funding for airports, yet he represents half of one. He has a great quote from one of his town halls where he says, if the people of Battle Creek and Kalamazoo felt like Battle Creek and Grand Rapids have more in common, that's fine with me, but I don't know that they would have drawn the lines that way, and that's what makes it hard for me to have to represent all of these individual communities in Washington. And that's where, again, I think when you start saying, like, this is common sense, why isn't this happening? Why don't we have clean drinking water, or our roads fixed, or our education system working the way maybe you want it to? I think there's not a lot of incentive necessarily, and it's very hard for politicians to even do their job correctly. But anyways, this is about what happens. We lose our voices, especially with term limits in Michigan. We have politicians who are kind of looking out for their next job or listening to special interests instead of being accountable to us as voters and to our communities and representing them and making sure we're getting stuff done. And in Michigan, because we vote 50% for Democrats, 50% for Republicans, we have, I think, for at least 70 years, both parties have manipulated this system for their game, and both are going to continue to do that unless we, the people, tell them that it's over. And what we see across the state is people agree. We had signatures from all 83 counties. What's really interesting and what I love is Kent County and Ottawa County actually were the highest number of signatures were gathered, and so far our most effective door knocking teams here. So West Michiganders know how to get it done. And this has been a problem since the beginning of, our country, when politicians get to write the rules for the election they're about to run in. Like when they're like, oh, okay, I'm about to run for office and now I get to choose which voters vote for me. Sounds great. But with the more data that we have on every single person, every single household, it's gotten really crazy. We mentioned Maryland earlier. Please look at number 3 on there, if you even can. This is how that district has evolved over time. This is the same exact district with more and more detailed information on what households are going to vote what way. And again, you look at that and you just think, maybe it was drawn without political intent. But in Maryland, the Democrats actually got quoted saying, the Republicans are lucky we even gave them 1 seat. And politicians talk like that, politics is a game, but when you're a voter who doesn't feel like your government is being responsive or cares about what you care about, or you see, people in your community struggling, it's very frustrating to accept that and to hear that and have people so proud to make statements like that. As, again, young, naive millennial, it made me mad. I don't want to be talked about that way. I deserve your respect because guess what? You work for me. My tax dollars help pay for you to be in office, and I'm pretty sure you should start focusing on that. So anyways, to actually make a Facebook post turn into a political campaign that's going to amend the Constitution, super easy. You just got to organize and pick a direction. You got to form a ballot question committee before you can spend over $500. You got to write constitutional language like everybody knows how to do. You have to gather 315,654 registered Michigan voter signatures in 180 days, and if anybody signs your petition twice, both names get thrown out. If they forgot their county, the name gets thrown out. And if you wrote in purple ink, the whole sheet gets thrown out. You have to get those signatures verified by the Board of State Canvassers, which is 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans who get called by both their party bosses and told how to vote. You have to win a lawsuit, not all the time, but we knew we'd be being brought to court because we're challenging the system. You have to win a lawsuit in the Court of Appeals, then you have to win a lawsuit in the Michigan Supreme Court, then you have to secure your ballot number and your 100-word summary and hope that it hasn't been toyed with so that the voters are so confused they don't know what they're voting on. And then the really easy task of getting about 2 million people to vote yes, make it to the bottom of their ballot, pay attention and know what gerrymandering is. While learning to work with people you just met online, forming an organization of 10,000 people, learning to manage projects, people, progress entirely online because you aren't a secret millionaire and online stuff is free. Taking on the political industrial complex and actually being nonpartisan. When you actually try to be nonpartisan, there is no infrastructure to assist you. I'll talk more about that later. Taking on the nonprofit industrial complex and having your stakeholders actually be the people of Michigan instead of some board members in some room somewhere so that you aren't afraid to make decisions that are good for people. Then you have to have a misinformation and smear campaign where the first day that you announce, the next day the Detroit News has an op-ed against you saying that you've worked for all of these political people, you have no idea who they are, and calling you shady, while getting your MBA and having a full-time job. Navigating the Michigan campaign finance law, raising multi-million dollars, and then learning how to run a political campaign. Piece of cake. It has been a piece of cake that has been gerrymandered into very tiny crumbs of patience and perseverance and believing with every ounce of your body that if we work together, the impossible is possible. And I just have to say, it works. If you stick to your guns and you keep your head down and you try to do things the right way, man, is it hard, and man, do you not make a lot of friends. And I'm somebody who likes having friends, but when you have democracy at stake, it feels worth it. It feels like I have no other choice. When, my college debt and all of my friends can't buy houses because of that. When, again, you hear about the tragedies in Flint or even over here in Zealand, if your friend ends up getting fired because they hit a pothole on their way to work, it doesn't feel like you can just sit back and wait around anymore. So that's why I kept my head down and went in. So this is my coworker, Kelly. This is my board of directors, and it's just a quick story. So I make this Facebook post, about 70 people start responding. I'm like, Kelly, can we do this? We talk about quitting our jobs and we run the numbers really quick. And we're like, okay, 315,654 signatures. Okay, if we both quit our jobs and we can work 20 hours a day, sleep 4 hours a night, we gather 3,000 signatures each. Okay, there's not enough registered Michigan voters even in the entire city of Grand Rapids to do this, but like we could travel. And it felt really impossible, but we were like, you know what? We gotta try. So then these characters come into play. Didn't know them. We met online, and I had formed committees. I was like, political campaigns. They probably have like marketing and fundraising and, you know, maybe a policy committee. And so these people who ended up being on my board of directors were all people who had stepped up to actually start leading those committees. I didn't know their political backgrounds. I didn't know them, but they were showing up every single day online to actually make the work happen. And so when we needed to organize, I really wanted our organization to be for and by the people who were stepping up every day. So I wanted each of the committee chairs to be on the board so that they could represent all of the people in their committee and their thoughts. So we were being a cohesive campaign together. And then we had some amazing, I don't know if anybody knows Joe Schwartz. He made a governor run, and then he was a representative, I believe in the Battle Creek, Kalamazoo-ish area. But he was a really amazing validator who stood for good governance and also not being afraid to make people mad, which was good. So can we do this? Can we change the actual process? When we needed to write that constitutional language, you know, we had a really great policy committee. They interviewed every single state and did a really thorough analysis of the academic research written on any state that didn't have politicians 100% drawing the lines. We had general concepts that we knew were best practices, but part of the problem I have with gerrymandering is that it's pretty much done behind closed doors by a small group of people, and it impacts millions of lives. And I was like, we're kind of doing that. Yes, we have a policy committee and anybody can join it, but we're kind of like in our own boardroom thinking we have the best ideas, but who knows if we do. So when we announced, we said, hey, we're gonna go out to the people across the state and ask you guys what you want and ask you to join our policy committee if you want to. But even if you don't, we're gonna do a huge survey to understand what are your preferences for a solution to end gerrymandering. We actually started in Marquette, Michigan, because one of the first people in our Facebook group was from the UP. And the first day she said, you know, I'm from the UP and nobody in Lansing ever asked my opinion. And if you don't ask my opinion, then I am going to stand against you. And I was like, whoa, okay. I don't even know what we're doing yet, but okay. So I purposely wanted to start up there first to tell her not only are we going to ask your opinion, but you are kicking it off. Like you are going to be the most important opinion that we get to begin with. And what was really beautiful is it was the end of February going into March, and we had, right? And we had 70 people, standing room only, during spring break up there, which I have like no, students around or anything. And that's when I knew we were onto something. We had a bunch of retired journalists who were calling all the local stations. I was calling into the radio. A lot of them weren't really sure what gerrymandering or redistricting was, so it was a fun experiment in learning how to do interviews. But what happened is we would talk about what is gerrymandering, what's redistricting, what does it look like in Michigan, what does it look like in other states who don't have politicians drawing the lines, and then we had a political scientist, she works at Grand Valley, design a survey asking people their preferences. If you don't want, first of all, do you want politicians drawing these lines? If not, who do you want drawing the lines? How do you want them drawing the lines? What are the criteria that you think make up representative democracy? And then the last part is, what do you want this process to look like? Do you want to be involved? Do you want, a formal voting structure? We had thousands of people respond. We ended up doing 33 town halls in 33 days. There were 4 of us, sometimes doing multiple in one day, driving across the state after dropping off kids and trying to eat dinner. But it was electric. Almost everywhere we went was standing room only. People were hungry to participate. And what we had done is wrote letters to every mayor and township supervisor of a city over 4,000 people saying, hey, we know you have no idea who we are. We know that you probably don't even care about gerrymandering, but we're having this town hall and we want all of the people in your community to come. So if there's any way you can help us, that would be great. Again, was new to this whole figuring it out. I would do it a little differently now, but what was really awesome is we would have the Republican, the Democrat, the Libertarian, the Green Party people come out. We'd also have the Knitters Club of Ypsilanti, which was really cool. And as part of these town halls, we'd have a discussion about what do you care about? One of the ways I would always start them was just saying, turn to your neighbor. Why did you show up today? And one of the most powerful things that happened, we actually had one of our first meetings, it had over 600 people, and I asked, who doesn't know what gerrymandering was? Because it was right in the beginning, it was only one person who raised her hand. I ended up giving her a little lizard, a salamander, a toy. But she ended up gathering 1,000 signatures, I found out later. And it was because she had come to something, gotten educated about it, and gotten really passionate and realized she can make a difference. So from those town halls, we saw some pretty clear results. People did not want politicians drawing these lines, but even more than politicians, special interests, lobbyists. People do not want them representing their individual beliefs. They want to speak for themselves. And there was a couple different lines that we saw running through all of this. One was that people wanted something fair, and by fair, I mean they wanted Democrats, Republicans, independents, a diversity of political beliefs at the table making these decisions together, not one party who happened to win more votes in the election right before the census getting to control everything. Impartial, they wanted, again, fair systems. We wanted to focus on people, and we wanted to eliminate gerrymandering. So we wanted to directly put in our state constitution, you can't draw these lines to benefit one political party. This should be about actual representation so we can get stuff done. And the last was transparent. People wanted to see how these decisions are being made. They want to attend meetings. They want to be a part of the process. And everything down to the computer algorithms that will be used to help generate these maps will all be made public instantly, which is very different from how most things happen in Michigan. We're pretty consistently ranked last for transparency in government. And I think that's why we saw it be such a high result from that. So we write our constitutional language, and then we have the very easy task of getting 315,654 signatures in 180 days. And we divided the state, we gerrymandered the state, if you will, into 14 different regions. And because we had done those town halls all across the state, we had a base infrastructure of people who had either donated or said they were interested, and a lot of people who were like, I've never done this, I don't know if I should. And we said, yeah, you should. Democracy is a participation sport. Like if you don't show up, the decisions still get made for you. So, and we had over, this is an updated number, but we had at the time over 300 individual teams that then were across our state, as you can see there. And it's pretty cool because when you overlaid the population of our state, we had representation across there too. And then we went out. So the one picture is from Art Fries. It's nice being in West Michigan because I think most of you know what that is. But people were across their communities, setting up in theaters, setting up at farmers markets. How many of you guys got approached or signed the petition? Yeah, that's beautiful. Okay. We were everywhere. We didn't have, traditionally about $3 million is spent for paid circulators, and we didn't have that kind of money. We could barely raise the $40,000 to make sure we could print the petitions. So people knew what we needed to do and how to be accurate on it. This is one of my favorite pictures. So it's actually a guy in his cow pasture getting approached by one of our volunteers. I was like, what? And then the same day was the Detroit Jazz Festival. So then I'm like, yes, we have the cow pasture and the jazz festival. Like, how Michigan is this? It just, and it was all being shared online. So even though you weren't in the community with everybody, you still had a sense of community because you knew, okay, I'm going to wake up early because it is snowing in the UP. We don't have that down here. And they're out like carving, voters, not politicians, on their car window in the snow. And like, you feel a little guilty then that you want to like stay warm in bed. But it really was an effort. We had local shops, bookstores, putting up signs. My car, actually, I was running out of gas, and I was in the middle of, I think somewhere in Saginaw, a cornfield, and I was like, oh, no, and I look up, and I see a Voters Not Politicians sign at a yarn store. And I was like, what? And I was like, we are everywhere. This is great. Talk about divine intervention. They showed me where the gas station was. And then celebrating, we made district costumes. I don't know if you guys have seen those, but just to draw awareness on things like that. And then basically, so that we could ship these, we made a version of the Pony Express, and we would coordinate how I physically drove our petitions over the bridge into the UP, met in a hospital parking lot where 3 people met me to then go all across the UP to deliver the petitions. But it really was the spirit of democracy. It was the power of people coming together. I continuously heard people say, this is one of the only groups where I actually talk to people who have different political beliefs than me, but I keep showing up because we're working on something together. And I didn't think that was possible. And that broke my heart a little bit because I was like, no, it is. But seeing people feel that and understand that and participate in that, I think a lot of people felt empowered, and all the leadership opportunities we created, I think also meant things to people. And then we got our signatures. This is Davia. She's one of our other board members too, but running through a race, and I just love that picture. So again, these were kind of our requirements. And here's what we did. We were on time and under budget. So we did, in 110 days, we actually gathered over 428,000 signatures. There's no requirement for where you get those signatures from, but we got them from all 83 counties in under 40 days. That was important to me because I purposely wanted a campaign that was formed by the people all across our state. And there are, I am still trying to do the research, but I think we may be the only campaign that's ever done that, which is very cool. When you pay for signatures, you are lucky if you get a 70 to 73% verification rate. We had a 92% verification rate, meaning the signatures we gathered were gathered correctly, and the largest error was people thinking they were registered to vote and they weren't. Which, our circulators can help. And we had almost 4,000 people all gather signatures, whether it was one or our top circulator, which was, I think, 3,071, which was more hours than we had actually been gathering signatures. So I'm like, Susan is like a beast. She's amazing. But what was really cool was just, again, the spirit of across the state and people coming together and stepping up to have those conversations. We had a big push around Thanksgiving, which was the inspiration for the campaign again. And what was really cool is we had some people being like, we're not talking politics at dinner. And we said, we're not. We're talking about civics. We're talking about the government that we all operate in. And to actually have a conversation and to challenge the assumption that you have to be partisan in order to want to change something has been, I think, the most rewarding part for me, because we're helping inspire people to remember that political talking heads have a lot of incentive. They raise money from making us feel divided. And yet the reality is a lot of us care about the same things. Top lessons from the field I just wanted to share. I think every team and volunteer matters. I had a lot of people that came to me who were like, I don't know if I should be participating. One person, her name was Rebecca, and I called her and I said, Rebecca, what kind of skills do you have or whatever? And she's like, I don't know. She's like, I like wood carving. And I was like, okay, yeah, well, we're gonna figure this out. And we talked about art prize, but when she started trying to carve districts very large, they would have toppled children out of wood, so it's not good. And then we ended up creating Legos and coloring pages, but it spurred the idea that when we needed to create custom-sized clipboards so we could gather people's contact information, because we weren't an organization before, we needed an extended size, would have cost us $7 each. And I wanted a campaign too where anybody could participate. We thought, we have a wood carver. So we had teams of people across the state reserving masonite wood at Home Depots and then gathering that wood and meeting in warehouses for the first time, meeting, cutting wood, and assembling over 6,000 clipboards for less than 10 cents each that we could then ship across the entire state because we had a wood carver. We've had people who've made quilts, we had people who've made dragons, we had people who figured out that supercalifragilisticexpialidocious is the same number of syllables as Independent Citizens Redistricting Commission, so that people can remember it. And I know it's a little hokey, but that's democracy. Coming together with this spirit of actually feeling like it can be fun and participatory, and yet you are doing something monumental that will impact elections for decades to come. I think achievable goals is the other huge lesson learned that I found. We had a counter that showed every single signature that we needed to gather, and we made our goals based on that verification rate. You could look up individually how many signatures you had gathered. So I'm sure if we have circulators in here, they probably remember how many they gathered. We had contests online where I got to shave our strategy strategist head if we reached our goals, which are 3 times our normal goals, and I did it live on Facebook, and it worked. And the whole spirit, even though, again, we were digitally only connected and not physically near each other, was a sense of community, a sense of us trying to do something even though everybody kept telling us it was impossible. Every news reporter I talked to said, well, you don't have $3 million to pay for signatures. And I kept saying, but we've got people. People matter. We can, the people who are paid to do this are people too. It's nothing separate. Oh, well, you guys, have to even pay for lawyers. Well, okay, we did the math. Okay, if all of us can find 4 people to donate $25, then we can pay for our lawyers now and for the next 6 months. So let's try and do that. When you start breaking it down, this, surmountable task starts becoming really achievable. And then the last part was shared success. So obviously, in the Metro Detroit or the Grand Rapids, Holland area, there's more people physically than in the UP. But every team mattered to us. And being able, the UP actually delivered and met their goals first almost every single week. And the goals were, in line with where the population was and how many people we needed to reach. But I think by having the mentality that no matter where you are in the state, even if you're only a team of 4, that you matter, that actually this depends on you showing up every day, had a really big impact for all of us. And then finally, after we returned in the signatures, we started getting endorsements, and people were like, oh, you guys are serious, which was nice. It took a lot of work to get there. That was over a year of work, but it felt good to finally be recognized. I completely understood why people would say, oh, an internet group of strangers can't do this. I mean, we weren't proven. We had to figure it out. But starting to finally see that validation was good. Then we started getting awesome coverage, like in the New York Times. They actually did a video piece, and then this very humbling article that just came out saying that the world needs more Katie Faheys, which it does not. It just needs more people realizing the power that they have. But then we had the Supreme Court, which in Michigan has sometimes been pretty partisan, I hear. And we ended up hearing stories about how, the lawyer who was bringing the lawsuit against us, his wife worked for 5 of the Supreme Court justice members, and you start feeling discouraged. But in the face of odds that maybe don't look good on paper, I think we have to believe in our democratic process. If we can't believe in the justice system, what are we even doing here? So tried to stay as neutral as possible, tried to trust the system. And the biggest question for the Supreme Court was, can the people of Michigan amend the Constitution on the topic of redistricting reform, or is it too complicated for people to know what they're doing, is kind of the mentality we kept being told. So we held a Let the People Vote rally outside of the Supreme Court. We actually filled the entire Supreme Court, and that had hundreds more people who couldn't fit inside, to just show that we're talking about real people. We're not talking about some special interest group that came into Michigan to change this. These are thousands of people who have put their lives on hold to make this happen, to figure out constitutional language and how to gather signatures and how to do education and carve districts out of wood. All of that has been people putting their lives on hold and stepping up to try and do something greater than themselves. And what was great is it worked. We got our 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans on the Supreme Court all voted to have this go through. So now we are securely on the ballot. Since then, yes, which is amazing. Just to help update where our infrastructure is now, so from those 14 regions, we actually made 14 regional councils where we have local representation from our central organizing committees who do things like media or outreach, trying to work with local groups to get endorsements or come do speaking engagements like this. Education, fundraising. We've knocked over 100,000 doors with all volunteers too, which is pretty phenomenal. We are having amazing conversations across the state in every kind of community. I have gone in Holland, Grand Rapids, Flint, and Benton Harbor, and all of those met people who are eager to talk about this. The biggest thing is because this process only happens once every 10 years, not a lot of people know about it. And once you start talking about it, though, they see the manipulation and realize that there can be a different way, but we have to make sure people know about this. We have over 240 trained voters, not politicians, educators who've made nearly 300 presentations. And of those town halls, the 33 that we did, since those 33, we've actually had 100 of our own town halls. I think now 105, which is pretty exciting. And then we have strong volunteer leadership in every aspect of the campaign. This is truly driven for and by the people. A lot of political consultants, they make money from selling themselves, which makes sense. And we do need political expertise. But a lot of us have very transferable skills, no matter what they are. And maybe we're professionals in a different way, but you can apply that to actually trying to improve our democracy. And I think that's what our secret weapon has been all along, not doubting that regular people can change the world. Here's a link, the Michigan Campaign Finance Network is an awesome watchdog for money and politics. We have over 18 times more individuals who've donated to our campaign than any other ballot initiative in the state, which is pretty exciting. It's significantly less money than some of the other ballot initiatives, but we have, and that under 16,000 number is actually probably under 10,000. We probably need to raise $14 to $17 million to be able to compete against the opposition who's been out since day one. And we aren't there yet. But what's really cool has been seeing thousands of people step up to contribute. I mean, I had never personally donated to a ballot question committee before. But now understanding the importance, seeing how much it costs to print petitions or to ship things or to have a website, it all makes sense. And what's really cool is so many people have actively decided to participate, and I'm very proud to show where our money is coming from, even if people try and say it's from somewhere else, because it really is for and by the people again. Other lessons learned, nonpartisan vendors are nearly impossible to find. We actually had an email go out to a lot of the Republican lawyers that we were trying to hire saying that if they worked with us, they would never work with the party ever again, which is very sad. And I think some of the Democrat stuff happened that way too, because we didn't want to be working for politicians. We wanted to be working for the people. We had a really great relationship with Loveland Technologies. They're a real estate company out of Detroit who ended up crafting this technology for us so that it could actually be nonpartisan, but trying to exist in that world so that volunteers, but also people who are contributing can feel confident that we are living by the standards we are saying. It's hard. And I hope that it continues to improve and more campaigns try and be nonpartisan, because I think it'll create more opportunities. So anybody who's an entrepreneur out there, nonpartisan. Governmental systems aren't particularly newcomer friendly. When we tried to do the Michigan Campaign Finance, it's called MERTS is how you have to report. They said, oh yeah, okay, our next training is in August. And I had 3 reports due before then. I was like, okay, well I need trained now. And they said, well, normally you just pay somebody who knows how to do this. And I was like, well, we can't. So we had to find 17 people to have a middle of the day webinar for a system that isn't cloud-based, so only one computer can actually submit the reports. So, 16 of us were on there just for fun. But that kind of stuff, all those obstacles. People are very disillusioned from the government outreach. I think a lot of people, a good example I think is the emergency manager law. There's a big petition drive to repeal that. People voted on it to repeal it, and then our government passed a different version of it a couple days after the most recent redistricting, which then stayed in place. But I think people have tried to make change happen before just to have it kind of taken away, and that's what we had to kind of overcome and help people understand that even though we're going after a constitutional amendment, it means more signatures, it means more money, it is harder to do, but that is why, because it's the most responsible to people. Democracy is a participation sport, and running a campaign that way leads to innovation. I don't think most people would have said cutting your own clipboards is a smart way to go, but I think it was one of the best things we did because everybody got to customize theirs. You had your local map on the end, bringing in and just trying to do things differently, holding those town halls, which ended up giving us a ton of volunteers and initial donations, but also creating local news markets who are talking about gerrymandering. I mean, we did it so we could reach people, but it ended up leading to this really effective tool. And then it's a powerful experience to be able to participate in the political process. I've seen so many people who said, I wish I would have known that I could change the world until now. And it breaks my heart that somehow I've helped that happen, but I'm really glad they know now. And I have a lot of people saying too, I wish I would have gotten involved earlier. And we had 14 people run for a local office and all of them win. And all of them were running because they learned how to organize through the campaign. And that's where I think that the impact of actually inviting people in and not being afraid of people who, think differently or maybe who are skeptical of your solutions is really impactful and how we make things better. So what's our actual solution? And I'm almost done, because you're probably like, okay, what is this? So what we heard from people, this is that, again, fair, impartial, and transparent. This is how it, and then based on best practices, it'll be 14 or a 13-member commission of regular people. So 4 people who self-identify as Republicans, 4 as Democrats, or if the 2 major parties end up switching, those will change, but for the foreseeable future, Democrats, Republicans, and then 5 who are not affiliated with either major party, so they can be independents, they can be libertarians, whatever, however people vote. There are some people not eligible to be one of those commissioners. It's the people who draw the lines now. Surprise. Political influencers, so lobbyists, if you're a partisan politician, they can still participate in the public hearings that will be held across the state, but they don't need to be one of these 13 people. We need people who are going to be there knowing their job is to listen and to follow the law. That is it. And if you have to be registered to vote in order to apply. The current process for fair, politicians and lobbyists draw their maps based on their own personal races and their party's races, but these maps will have a strict rule that says a political advantage cannot be given to a party or an individual politician or somebody who is a candidate. Because right now, if you and I were running against each other, Ann, and I was in office and you weren't, and I knew where you lived, I could draw your house out of the district about 3 months before the election. And you have a whole new set of constituents you get to try and win over. Impartial. So we actually have it so that 2 of those Democrats, 2 of the Republicans, and 2 of the independents all have to agree. They all have to vote for something before it can pass. If you don't have consensus, it doesn't pass, we're trying again. And this is in other states and works very effectively. Transparent. So everything, this commission cannot meet if it's not public. They will have, before they can even start drawing the lines, they are required to hold 10 meetings across the state where they go and ask people what's important to them. They would come here and say, do you feel like Holland and I need to know West Michigan geography better. So I'll go to Grand Rapids. So, do you think Grand Rapids and the city of Wyoming have more in common, or Grand Rapids and Allendale have more in common, or whatever? Or people could come and say, I'm a cherry farmer up north maybe, and saying like, we want somebody who's paying attention and who can be accountable to us in the Michigan legislature. So even though we technically are outside of this city boundary, can you consider making sure we're here? And one of the other states in California where it's kind of the opposite situation. It was Republicans who are, even though California votes more Democrat, they're being very overly gerrymandered. And at the very top of their state, the number one thing they heard from people who were giving testimony was that they wanted their congressional districts to be vertical. And the reason was they only had horizontal districts, and so the freeways north and south were great. But the freeways west to east were horrible. So everybody kept going up to Oregon and going on their freeways to come back down into California. And they're like, seriously, I know that you guys are competitive on how you do road funding and you want like the credit, so just make them the other way. You can get the credit, but fund our roads. Just, common sense things that you might not think about. So those meetings will be required, and then after any map is drawn, it has to have public comment for at least 45 days before they can decide to adopt it or not, so that any changes that need to be made, there's equal opportunity to give that, and they actually have to respond to public comments too, which makes it a much more effective system. And the hearings will most likely be held online, but you can also attend in person, really just trying to make a lot more accountability in the system. And then here's the MAP criteria. So equal population. The Voting Rights Act, which is a federal law, must be followed. The areas must be contiguous, which just means that you can't have like Mackinac Island and Detroit somehow magically connected through the air. It has to physically be connected. No advantage can be, communities of interest, which is going back to being able for public participation, going and saying, I want these roads, we're this economic interest, or in Battle Creek and Kalamazoo, we have a shared airport, can we think about that? No advantage given to a party, politician, or candidate, respecting existing boundaries, city, township, and county, and then compactness. So it'll be proposal 2. We officially got that last week. We got our 100-word summary too, but it'll be a commission of citizens that will redraw district maps. You vote yes if you are in favor. Right now, we're still building our army. We need about 10,000 people, we think. So canvassing, phone banking, fundraising, if you're an artist, if you have, media connections, whatever it is. If you're a wood carver, We got a spot for you. But our biggest thing really is trying to reach people. We think we need about 2 million voters, and we expect to most likely be outspent. There's a lot of political interests in state and out of state who don't want this to happen because they save a lot of money by guaranteeing election results. Just makes sense, but it doesn't work for us, the people. And so getting the word out is our number one thing that we'll be focused on from now until the election. If you're on, I know that most of you are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, but we have an email list too, but just wanted to make sure people knew that, or our website is votersnotpoliticians.com. I could play this, but I'll just read the quote. From President Ronald Reagan, that's all we're asking for, an end to the anti-democratic and un-American practice of gerrymandering congressional districts. And at the time it was in California, one of the most egregious examples of Republicans received a majority of votes in Congress, but Democrats won. The fact is gerrymandering has become a national scandal. And we see that across the state, or across the country. There's actually 4 other states working on ballot initiatives, Missouri, Utah, and Colorado, and then a lot of people who have Supreme Court cases too. But that's kind of my overview. Thank you so much for listening.
Katie, thank you. A remarkable story of personal initiative and success that obviously we all admire. Our time is pretty limited this morning, and this is a tricky part. When we ever get into a political situation, we don't want our HASP meetings to be kind of a political event. And so we'll take maybe 1 or 2 questions here, but they're to be questions of information more than argument, if I will.
I can take it.
I may have missed it, but how are the individual commission members selected?
Great question. Yeah. So there's 2 ways. So is everybody, yeah, I'm sure you guys are familiar with like the jury duty system. So 50% of the people will be kind of through a similar process where the Secretary of State will mail out applications, mostly so that, you know, if you don't know about this, you still get the opportunity to participate because you might be a very good commissioner, even though you didn't know you could apply. Where people will opt in, though, so you're not forced to do it. You get to say, yes, I want to go, and there's no penalty if you don't. The other 50% will be through an application process. And what happens is the Secretary of State makes sure all of the criteria are met, so nobody's lying. You have to take an oath on which way you want to represent yourself. And then it's kind of like a lottery will be drawn, but with statistical weighting to match the demographics of our state. Because one thing we heard in those surveys from all the people that we got was they wanted people from across the state on this commission so they could listen to different types of concerns depending where they were holding those meetings. So everybody didn't want just Wayne County having all 13 commissioners. So then it's a little complicated, so I apologize. But the quadrant leaders, which are the majority and minority House and Senate members, so are the elected politicians, whoever the top 4 will be, can strike up to 10% of the applicants in case, like, they have the most incentive to not want other highly political people there. So they can take that out, and then from there, there'll be another whittling down based on the randomization process into those buckets, so that you have the 4 Democrats, 4 Republicans, and 5 independents. The reason we went with that is in other states and in other countries, it's a pretty effective way of getting representation. But the other thing is, unfortunately, in Michigan, because we have so many appointments, which is fine, but there's not a lot of master public officials, like officers who are nonpartisan. And we didn't want one person being able to have the control of doing that. That's why it's so random.
Peg, last question.
Katie, thank you so much. And I just want to say that we just got word that MEA is endorsing the proposal.
Yay!
So you can add that to your list.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And
Thank
I
you.
just want to commend you so highly for representing women and youth. Keep it up.
Thank you. It has only been possible because of a bunch of people.